So we're going to take a closer look at Talent Q and the two sections, which are Elements and Dimensions, and we're going to begin with the Talent Q Elements sections. Elements is a range of online ability tests in a number of different areas. So a question we tend to get is, what is a cognitive ability test? So to give you that definition, before we start, a cognitive ability assessment tests how well a candidate can perform when they're asked to try their hardest to do well, as opposed to measuring their typical or average performance. So this test really gets at an individual's potential or maximum performance. There are 3 tests in the Elements portfolio that you can choose from, which are numerical, logical, and verbal reasoning ability. These tests are designed to be comprehensive, and because they use the adaptive testing approach, candidates are quickly taken to questions at difficulty levels that are appropriately suited to their ability. This is done by presenting participants with easier or more difficult questions, depending on whether they answered the previous question correctly or not. So what this means is that the test can be completed in far less time than traditional tests, and the same test can be used for individuals across role levels, so from graduate or frontline individuals to senior level managers. Clients tend to use Elements to help them make better recruitment decisions. As you know, the best hiring decisions are always made when you have the most information possible, and Elements is designed to do just that. It can also be used for identifying high potential in your current employees. So to give you a better idea of what these assessments entail, I'm going to briefly show you an example of all 3 of the assessments. The first assessment we'll be looking at is the numerical reasoning test. This measures one's ability to reason with numerical information and data. This type of test would apply to roles where it's important for the candidate to work well with large amounts of numerical information, such as budgets or analyzing business data. You can see an example question from the numerical test here, and in this example, the individual is being asked to answer a question based on the chart found on the left, which shows the quarterly commissions earned for each financial advisor during 2006. The participant is being asked to find out which advisor earned the lowest commission for the half year, July to December, based on this data. They have 90 seconds to answer this question and 75 seconds for each subsequent question based on the same table. So for each new table, the clock resets to 90 seconds, and any questions based on that, it would go back to the 75 after that. So it's kind of working under pressure a little bit to see how they would do. The verbal reasoning test is the next one, and it measures one's ability to interpret verbal information and reach correct conclusions from that written information. So for example, verbal reasoning is very important for understanding business information and comprehensive report writing. Here you can see a sample from this test. A person will be asked to read a written text and answer a set of questions corresponding to that text. The last assessment is the logical reasoning section, and that is basically logical reasoning is the ability to analyze abstract information and apply it to determine outcomes and patterns, such as completing sequences of shapes, as you can see in the sample we've included here for you. This can be used in a variety of roles requiring complex problem solving, such as roles in IT, science, or engineering. So, once an individual has taken the Elements assessments, you receive a feedback report that compares the individual scores to a norm group of your choosing. There are 3 norm groups for you to choose from, and those are professional, graduate, managerial. That's the first one. The second is customer service, administrative, and the third is a composite, which is a combination of the 2. So you can really make sure you're getting the best information possible about your candidates based on which norm group you choose. So it really is a great tool in terms of getting that information and the flexibility surrounding that information as well. Just as a side note, you can see Talent Q Elements is available in many different languages, so it can be used globally within an organization. Another really great thing about Talent Q is the cost. Each Elements test costs $20, so this tool can be used in high-volume situations for quite a low cost when comparing to other tools in the market.
So we'll be going into the personality assessment in just a minute, but we'd like to take a moment to ask you another brief polling question. As you see here, take a moment to think of an employee who really excelled either in a role or within the organization, and what differentiated them from the average performer. So if you could take a minute and make a selection here with the choices that you have, and we'll display the results in just a second. All right. So as you can clearly see here, the vast majority of you agree that it was a really combination of these attributes. Not only do they have to be technically skilled, but they also have to have these softer skills that really make a difference in terms of being effective on the job. So essentially nobody here chose the trait that the person just has to be highly technical at their job. So it's really, there's a combination of things that come into play for someone to be effective. So when we're taking a look at the personality assessment of TalentQ, people often ask, really what is personality? And there isn't really one simple definition of personality per se. Essentially, it's concerned with a person's preferred ways of either behaving or thinking or feeling as well. And it's those patterns of thinking and our emotional dispositions that particularly affect the longer-term actions. Because they're kinds of behaviors that we prefer to engage in, and they're in our comfort zone. So TalentQ Dimensions assessment, unlike the abilities test that Polly was just discussing, really measures the key personality attributes that are related to work. So what it helps you do is, get some deep insights and information about an individual that you would typically get over, the course of much more time working with that person, so perhaps months or, even years at times. Now, the development of this assessment itself is really rooted in scientific research, but what's also important to know that it was really designed with the practical use in mind, so to help organizations make key decisions related to the workplace specifically. There are really few great personality questionnaires in the market today that really were specifically designed for the work context as, opposed to general life. So with this assessment, candidates, won't be asked those strange questions and be left wondering, what did this have to do with how I might behave at work? Why are they asking me these types of questions? So it's really going to have a high face value for your candidates. And we'll talk about this in more detail in just a bit, but what's also really important to know about this particular assessment is that it just uses one questionnaire, but with that data, it can provide the user, several different report outputs to choose from. So it can really help you solve a variety of different talent management challenges throughout the whole employee life cycle. So, you can really use dimensions to support any number of things that you're working on. So if you're assessing for selection, you're trying to identify some high potentials and make decisions around that piece. If you're doing some assessments for development only, as well as if you're trying to do some team building or development, or even if you're going through a culture change or a big restructuring within the organization as well. There's many applications for this tool. And, just to show you, too, what really sets Dimensions apart from other assessments that are on the market today is that versatility that I was talking about. So, with just that one questionnaire, you're essentially able to replace many other tools that separately, can be used for recruitment or for development or for team development specifically, and so on. So because of this, it really reduces the administrative time on your end, as well as possible test fatigue as well from the part of the candidates completing the actual test. And not to mention it's going to save you on costs as well. So the most you'll ever pay for all of these report sections is $120. Or if you just need certain sections that you're not using the other areas for now, you can just order them separately as well. So it's really cost effective. Now, so you can get a picture of what the output of this assessment is. As you can see here, there's a number of different reports that all serve different purposes. So depending on what area of talent management you're working on, you're really going to be able to choose the right section that's going to help you do that. So we'll just take a few minutes to go into some of these different reports in more depth so you'll have a better understanding of what the applications are for each one. Just to start with the trait profile, this is the output that measures an individual's personality in terms of how they prefer to work with other people, how they prefer to conduct tasks and projects, and also how they manage their emotions and their drives. So those are three main domains that it's measuring here. Unlike some of the other personality assessment reports out there that really cannot be used for selection, this profile in particular is detailed enough, and it also looks at each aspect of personality in terms of a scale. So, where someone may score at one end of the scale, showing a strong preference for one end of the scale, or even, fall towards the middle or the left side of the scale. The purpose of this approach is to be able to put people against this sliding scale so you can see, degrees of differentiation between them, and that allows you to, sort of choose the best fit person against the requirements of the role. And what we want to underline here is, regarding personality characteristics, there's no right way to be. Really it just depends on the job. So again, you want to really complete a thorough job analysis, find out which traits are important to success in that particular role, and then look at the candidate's profile against those traits. So for example, if you're looking for someone who's going to have to be very highly comfortable influencing others or being persuasive, or maybe someone, who will be required to be socially confident in meeting new people or presenting in front of audiences, you can take a look at someone's preferences and see how well it'll align with the requirements of the role. Another really great feature in Dimensions, and what's been really widely used, by clients in selection, particularly, is the role match profile. This is intended to be used, again, for selection, and it mirrors the structure of the trait profile that you just saw, but it includes shaded areas that are, indicated as danger zones, or essentially areas of potential poor fit between an individual and a role. So, if you think for a moment about a person who maybe you wanted to clone, what are those key attributes about that person that really made them successful in that role and what they're doing? And so the Talent Queue system has what's called the Role Profile Wizard, and it takes you through creating these customized role profiles, which you can create any number of them. There's no limit to how many you create, and where you can yourself define, what the traits are that you're looking for in a candidate. So, which traits are critical, which ones are going to be less important for that role. And then when you're done, you'll have the profile with the shaded danger zones, and the candidate's profile will be shown against this profile that you've created, so indicating areas of potential good fit versus poor fit. And you can create, again, an unlimited amount of roles, as I mentioned. So we see a lot of clients use them for, any number of roles, whether it be sales or, maybe more specific roles as well. And just to mention, too, what's also a really great feature here is that once the role profile has been created, it can be adjusted. So, if you find that maybe too many people are being screened out by, the criteria that you've identified, or perhaps too many candidates are actually fitting in really nicely into the danger zones, you can adjust the profile to get an even better fit. And again, just as with the trait profile I showed earlier, it doesn't measure someone's ability, but rather it's the preference that they show for those characteristics. So, these would be areas where you'd want to probe for more information and examples in an interview. So, and just a last piece, too, I'll note here, another great way to leverage that same data that you're using to make a hiring decision, you can use that information to help with the onboarding process, too. So if, getting the person off to the right start, you can help them learn, what their strengths are that they'll be able to leverage to be successful in the role, and also, where might be there some areas that they should be focusing on for development, too, in the future. The next profile that we'll show you here is the team profile. It's intended for use in both individual as well as team development context. So it's providing a view of an individual's strengths and preferences for specific roles in a team situation. So, maybe the person has a preference for being the driver or leading from the front, or maybe someone has a preference for being the completer, someone who's focused on details and completion of tasks. So these 8 roles essentially cover the areas of activity where a team needs to perform in order to reach their goals. So if you have team profiles for several individuals, you can also get a combined composite team report, and that'll show you, how the various members of a team prefer to operate and whether the distribution of preferences for these different roles is balanced, whether the role preferences complement each other. So this can really be useful in building an understanding of, team dynamics and helping to integrate new teams together, say, post-merger or acquisition, or even after a reorganization of a company. It'd be really useful for that. The behavioral type at work profile that you're seeing here is related to Carl Jung's type profile, his approach to personality. It's similar to the MBTI. However, it does go beyond general preferences, and it focuses specifically on behavioral type as it relates to work. So that's really useful as well to think about that difference. It also has an additional scale of personality that accounts for emotional stability. So, where the profile will indicate a person's preference for achieving, which can be characterized by a need to be continuously achieving, and where the person might have a sense of urgency, or if the person has a more balanced preference, which can be characterized by maybe a more laid-back approach to work, or where the person might enjoy achieving but isn't stressed out if they're not achieving at all times. So this report is really primarily used for developmental context. It's good for individual as well as team development and interpersonal situations too. And just the final report section we'll show you is the derailment report. This report is also designed primarily for development and coaching purposes as well. So it presents here an individual's profile against 8 factors that can lead to a person either derailing or, on the opposite end of the scale, prevent a person from either progressing or advancing in their career. So it's important to keep in mind here on this one that these factors don't represent attributes that a person is necessarily currently exhibiting. These are really, factors that a person may show if they're under a lot of pressure or stress. So you really have to take into account what role are they in, what role might they, be considered to be going into. Will that be highly stressful for them? And it also can be used for, early intervention, so preventing any possible derailment for occurring later on. So just as with the dimensions, we just wanted to show you here, or just with the elements, dimensions is also available in a number of different languages. We've, selected some of them here for you. There's others as well, and we're happy to share that information with you after the call. So just to bring this all into life a little bit more for everyone, we wanted to share a couple of examples of how clients have been able to incorporate some of these tools into their talent management processes. So in this first example here, a client made great use of actually both dimensions and elements assessments as they were getting ready to really do a major reorganization and privatization of their company. Saline Water Conversion Corporation used the abilities and personality assessments along with information, on the individual's experience, their performance, what technical skills they were measured against, and also behavioral competencies. They integrated with other assessments to be able to, help them assess over 5,000 employees so they can have a better and more accurate picture of their current bench strength and to really make the best decisions around matching employees to new roles that they were going to be positioning for them. And just as another example as well, the Royal Mail Group, which essentially is the UK version of the United States Postal Service, they made use of also dimensions and element assessments to facilitate their appointment of high potential leaders into new positions. So because dimensions, the personality assessment can be mapped to an organization's competency model, Royal Mail did just that. So they mapped the dimensions assessment to their leadership competencies, and then they assessed over 700 managers with a combination, again, of other assessments as well, and interviews, to make their final decisions of really who was the best fit for the new job appointments. So now that we've shared with you information on what Talent Q dimensions and elements are and how they can help you, we'd really like to end this webinar by showing you a final reason of why we believe psychometric assessments are valuable to add to your hiring process. So this chart you see here shows some interesting results from studies that were done on the average cost of using certain hiring processes and their correlation with predicting future performance. So if you look at the bottom right quadrant, you can see conducting in-depth behavioral event interviews or putting candidates through rigorous assessment centers are both strong in predicting candidates' future performance, but the average cost per candidate to do these is really quite high.
On the other end of the spectrum, the top left box, gathering data from resumes and references, as well as carrying out the standard or unstructured interviews, is much more affordable. However, they don't show a strong prediction of performance. So really, the best quadrant to be in is the top right, where the employers spend less on the hiring process, yet are able to maximize prediction of the candidate's performance. As you can see here, validation studies done with psychometric abilities and personality assessments show that there are low-cost assessments that do a great job in predicting future performance. So what we really want to underscore throughout this entire webinar is that adding psychometric assessments to a selection process will not be the only process you use when making hiring decisions, but rather it's an additional viewpoint that would enable you to get a better, more reliable, and objective perspective on the candidate. So it's not the decision maker, but more a piece of advisory information that will enable you to make better decisions.